So the question was, have you ever designed any of Shama Appa's plays?
Shama has done very few productions, I think, and one of the very important production of hers was Mudra Rakshas. In Mudra Rakshas, I used a kind of a curtain in the middle, um, oblong, and it was like a kalamkari. The whole story of Chanakya was painted in the kalamkari style, and then you had the rest of the background um, with a newspaper, actual newspaper, you know, flats put all around, and with the banner lines and things like that, because of the highly political kind of play, and I use this technique.
Okay, so people are still coming on to this video, so the questions will come. Why don't you talk about Sarphere and what you did with the Prithvi stage? You remember Sarphere? It was set on the balcony, on the terrace. Albert Camus' play.
Sarphere.
Yeah. And you put the banister.
The terrace.
Yeah.
Yeah, and two different plays I have used that kind. I have used the parapet of a terrace, um, the shape of the Prithvi stage itself, um, and then the whole action takes place within that area, and these people who are plotting some kind of a terrorist, I think, activity. They have a water tank on the stage and things like that. I used that in Sarpere. And in a similar way, I used in Kumarni Agashi, a Gujarati production of. In that, I had a terrace set with Praveen Joshi directed, completely realistic, and it was done on a very small stage. No doubt, I mean, the Jahind College stage was a very small stage, but it was one of my very good designs, and it was very effective because the aging of the whole thing was very well done. It was painted beautifully, the the water tank and the the rivets on that, and the bolts and nuts on that, and and the aging, you know, uh, water overflowing. Uh, so it was well, good set, and then from the from there, from the terrace, um, somebody, the main character, I think, he falls down, and so I mean he falls only about 3 feet down, but gave the impression as if he fell down from a second floor or third floor terrace. It was, that was an interesting kind of set which I did. There were.
So someone's asked, how did you visualize the set design for Kuri by Samudaya?
Kuri was a very simple thing, just a small little platform and a mandap with bamboos and buntings. So because although Sarveshwar Dayal Saxena did not think about the Kuri as or Bakri as a character, but I made it into a character, and an actress played the Bakri. And then they tried to install a little temple for her, these people, and then try to fool the people and collect a lot of money from the villagers and things. So this was that, and that small little platform was all that was there, and then 4 bamboos. A very simple set it was. And later on, the same platform is used for other scenes where the politician comes. He needs a kind of an elevated space to stand and give his lecture, or a guest of honor comes and in the play in the end. And then, so that one little platform was used. And when we did this play in a festival of street plays in Bhopal, I remember we put up just this little platform in the market area behind the masjid, and we did the play, and the people were just surrounded all around, and they sat and watched the play. So it was something like a theater in the round. Very simple.
Someone's asked, what was the most challenging play that you designed for IPTA?
There are so many. I think Caucasian Chalk Circle was one of my elaborate sets. The Bertolt Brecht's, how an elaborate opening, and slowly the stage becomes simpler and simpler, and ultimately it just becomes just a chair and on a kind of a palanquin, and Azdak is taken round on that stage. But in the beginning, the church and the governor's house, and they were all very elaborate, and we had a scroll in the middle at the back. But even my other set, which was very interesting, was the one which I did for a play called Rashomon. The Rashomon play, Akira Kurosawa's film, was shot in in one piece of the forest, and it is throughout drizzling. So that effect, that grey kind of atmosphere which she created, I tried to do that in on the stage. And we opened the play, I think, in Prithvi in Bombay, and I used the height of the this the open space which is there, which goes right up to about 20 feet high, and I had this woodcutter, right on top. Bomi Kapadia played that role, and he comes down from there, and then he's a person who watches the whole thing that is happening. And that play, the structure of the play was very interesting. It is one, killing takes place. A samurai was killed by a bandit, and then he has an affair with his samurai's wife. So, and the play repeats itself. It is 4 different versions are enacted on the stage from 4 different characters, and the audience becomes the judge, and they have to take a decision as to which one is the correct interpretation. It's a very interesting play, Rashomon.
Someone's asked, what are your thoughts on set designs that use heavy setup and a lot of technical elements that make the actors disappear. I think what they mean is that the set is the foreground and the actor somehow becomes secondary.
No, I I give a lot of space for the actors and their movement. I don't crowd stage too much. But if you take the Smashana Kurukshetra, the play, which is anti-war, anti-battle play, uh, you can see the entire chorus and it was one single set with just a cutout of a horse which has been stabbed and you know killed, and the rath is broken, and that was this kind of a symbol which I used in Smashana Kurukshetra. And after that, um, when people come for their dear ones who fought in the battle and why they fought in the battle, for whose sake, whether they did fought for the Pandavas or did they fight for the Kauravas. So I used very minimum kind of mm, set, and a lot of space was given for the movement. And Hamsa Moili, she choreographed the whole thing, and we had a martial art expert also, Rajan, who did the martial art part, and it was very interesting. One of my really good designs, I must say.
Someone's asked what for you are the most important things to look at when designing sets and costumes.
Well, in India, you have to create sets with minimum expenses because nobody can afford elaborate settings like in the West. I mean, so you try techniques which are simple. Material that is used is very simple. You see, like in what is architecture? It is a use of new elements, you know, uh, which are used to build a house or a building or something. In the same fashion, even in theater, you have to use many materials which have come. I mean, it can be from paper. You can start with paper because that's the cheapest material available, and certain kind of plastics are used, and certain canvases are used, and so it's a question of how. I mean, to give the effect of glass, for example. I've done that in the play Dragon, Schwartz Dragon, which is called Rakshas. I used a lot of uh, stained glass effect on the stage. It was very interesting. So, but the stained glass was not real glass. It was just sheets of plastic painted with kind of colors. So, I used a lot of cellophane paper stuck in that, you know. So the cellophane paper is also not an expensive material. So I mean, because the cost restraint is always there, so you have to minimize the expense on materials and make sets.
Uh, Speaking of architecture, someone has asked that you've designed auditoriums and you've also designed for proscenium and thrust. So, what is the differences between designing for
In the
proscenium?
proscenium stage, normally it's a given frame. So within that frame, everything should happen. You can't change it. But in a thrust-in stage, you have just a space, and your audience is sitting almost on three sides of the stage. So you have to use a different technique so that all the people from different angles can watch the play and have the impact of it. So the designing for a proscenium theatre is very, very different because a lot of things are hidden, you know. But in the thrust-in stage, you can't hide things. That whole idea of creating that illusion is not there. So you will avoid creating illusions. Like in Western operas, the illusion becomes very important. Whereas in a Brechtian theatre, that illusion is broken. You know. So this is an approach, and thrust-in stage gives you a scope to do that. You don't have these illusions at all.
How difficult is it to manage the color of the set and costumes along with the light, and how do you think about that?
Well, you see, the thing is, when you light up a stage, you use certain colors also. So when you think of your costume, suppose you design something in a green color, and then you have some amber light coming on it. So that green and an amber, when they mix, it becomes a little brownish. You have to imagine beforehand what kind of uh, colors you're going to use in the lighting. So that scheme has to be worked out. It's not very easy. Suppose you have a blue light and a yellow costume, then it becomes green. So you have to think about it before you design itself, and what kind of lighting, what kind of colors you're going to use in the light. If you're using a lot of colored light, then you have to design the costumes also accordingly. You have to take care because the light changes the the look of any color.
But what if you're not designing the lights yourself? Like you design your own lights, but for other people, the costume designer might be a different person from the light designer.
Yeah, but he should sit with the lighting person and then talk to him about it. But his scheme of colors for the costumes and what kind of lighting should be done. So it's a question of coordinating between two different artists. One technician is a lighting man, the other one is a designing person. Sometimes, the set design is done by somebody, the costumes is done by someone else, the makeup is done by someone else. So in theater it happens that different people do different jobs, but then they have to sit together and work out to bring in certain kind of harmony.
Uh, Someone has asked if you have a favorite set designer, and who is that?
I have one of my very favorite set designer and European designer is Heinz Heckroth. He's a German who did no doubt a lot of films, and then and he is the chief designer in Frankfurt Theatre, the National Theatre in Frankfurt, and he did a lot of designing for um, films also. And this was early uh, during the wartime, in the Second World War. He escaped the Nazis, went away to England, and then he worked with Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, who were filmmakers, and they made a number of very interesting and very well designed films. And Red Shoes is one of his contributions. It was a ballet film. The entire ballet was designed very beautifully. Um, it is based on a story by Hans Christian Andersen, um, The Red Shoes. And then there was A Matter of Life and Death, and Gone to Earth, and many other films which were made by these directors, which Heinz Eckroth designed. I have, in fact, when I went to Germany in 1961, I met him at the Frankfurt Theatre. He was my favorite designer, and I had an opportunity to meet him and talk to him, and saw some of his paintings and things like that.
Someone has asked about the cost of transporting sets and how that's an issue when you try to tour with the play. So how can you manage that?
Yeah, these are the problems that we have. The constraint is there. You see, if you're a touring theater, then you have to have everything folding, and take the sets in trucks, if not by train. So this problem is always there. We don't have that kind of a system like in Europe, where elaborate sets are transported by special kind of trucks, which can, which are specially designed for taking sets. It is a difficult part. But I had a similar experience when I did a film for which there was an air crash which takes place in Sonamarg, in Kashmir. I constructed the entire set of a Boeing aircraft, in Chembur in RK Studios, and then carried the set in 10 different trucks, 10 regular trucks, to Sonamarg, and managed to put it together and showed the crash and did the aging there. So it was a film where Sunil Dutt, who was a pilot, he was saved. It was a very challenging thing to think of a Boeing as a set. Boeing aircraft is a huge aircraft.
Someone's asked, you said Rashomon is your best design play, in your opinion, but someone's asked for IPTA, what was your best designed plays, and your best designed play, and if you can talk about that.
I said the Caucasian Chalk Circles, Safed Kundali. The Urdu title was Safed Kundali, and that had a very interesting setting. The whole idea is how you start the play with a spectacle and then go on reducing the elements, and it becomes a very, very simple, the court scene becomes the simplest, just a chair for the judge, and a chalk circle is put, and the child is kept in the circle, and the two women who claim the child, the the mother and the one who was brought up the child, you know. So, so it needed that kind of a space and a simplicity. So that is one of my very well-designed plays, Vipta.
What about Dekh Teri Bombay that you went to Paris with and you took a ship?
Yeah, I know. It was a very elaborate kind of, the whole the life of Bombay in 24 scenes, 24 hours and 24 scenes. So I had the city of Bombay in kind of painted backdrops and cutouts. So, but unfortunately, when we went to Paris, there was a strike in the ship, all Italian ships, So we were going by SS Victoria, and there was a strike. And in Pakistan, they took it to the port in Karachi, and all our sets and costumes were in the in the hold. So I had a lot of problem, and ultimately I requested the captain to allow me to go inside, and especially obliged. And then I took out whatever I could, and wrapped them up in curtains which we had, and took like coffins, dead bodies being taken. We were airlifted by Pakistan International Airways to Rome. So then from Rome, by train, I went to Paris, and we staged it in the Sarah Bernard Theatre. So with that, whatever little set that I had, we managed it. Because constructing a set in Paris would have been very expensive, and we couldn't have afforded it at all.
Someone has asked about your work with Praveen Joshi on Gujarati plays. If you can talk.
What is the question?
Can you say something about what work you've done with him?
A lot of his plays I have designed, and this Sapnana Vavetar is one of my very good designs for Praveen Joshi. And there is another play which he did. It was based on a film called The Visit, and that was another good design. Then I had this Madurais Kumarni Agashi, and then I did another play for him where it was a kind of a painted backdrop which will fall down into a platform, The whole thing was like a drawbridge. The whole idea was like a drawbridge. And even characters, they come from the back onto the stage. And that was a very good design. It's based on Tendulkar, play, Sapnana. And it was actually based on a film called Rainmaker, where Burt Lancaster had acted in that film. But anyway, that's a little controversial thing because Tendulkar said he hadn't seen the film before he wrote the play. Quite possible. Two people can think of the same thing.
Someone has asked if you can talk about the design for Mote Ram Ka Satyagraha, which barely has a set.
Moteram Ka Satyagraha was a tribute to Premchand and Safdar Hashmi. So I just had two curtains painted. One was of Premchand, a big portrait, about 10 feet by 10 feet, and then I had Safdar Hashmi also 10 feet by 10 feet, and one um, Premchand's curtain was at the back, and in the front we had the Safdar Hashmi painting. So when Safdar Hashmi painting went up, uh, Premchand used to come down to the stage, and when Premchand went up, Safdar Hashmi's portrait. So it was like a tribute to them, because the character Moteram was based on one of the stories by Premchand, and Habib Tanvir and Safdar Hashmi had done the play. It was a musical basically, and it was a tribute in a way. I have used this kind of a portraits in some other plays also, like Kailasam's play, which I did, which is again a tribute to the writer. So I used a whole big painting of his face, and then it was that acted as the background. That is C.R. Sima did it in Kannada.
Okay, so maybe we can do one last question,
Yeah.
which is, if you had to give advice to young designers today, other than what you mentioned, budget constraints, what do you think they should really focus on? What advice would you give young designers today?
You see, when you think of design, everyone talks of authenticity. But I don't think authenticity is that important. Nothing is that authentic. You have to use a certain style, and you can be authentic to that style of thing. Suppose you take a miniature of which like in Darashiko, I used a miniature, you know, um, and did the whole thing again very portable and as less expensive as possible. I used just mats, chicks, out of which I created that feeling of the arches and the four kind of minarets, especially in the many of these structures, the Muslim structures, Islamic architecture, they are very symmetrical. And I used a little bit of a scenic painting at the back on a strip. So I mean, it is not authentic to the period and things like that, but it gives that atmosphere. It captures that atmosphere. So you have to think of innovations, how to do it, how to make it cheap by cost, and then effective, you know. So I think that the authenticity part of it should be to a certain style rather than to an actual era, you know.
Okay, so that was the end of the session. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll end the session now.
Thank you.